Konnichiwa. Today we're going to talk about two words that often cause people difficulty and confusion in immersion because they're often not explained very clearly, so it's difficult sometimes to understand what exactly it is that they're doing. The two words are kurai and horo. Now, I've had a lot of requests for kurai here and on my Patreon, and quite a few requests for horo, and I'm going to deal with them together because I think they can throw a little light on each other. And before we begin, I'll just say that if you have any words that are causing you trouble, bringing you to a halt in understanding things in your immersion, please put them in the comments below, and I'll either reply right away or add them to my list of things to deal with. Alright, so horo and kurai. They're both nouns, of course. Practically everything in Japanese that isn't a verb or an adjective, as we know, is in practice a noun or a noun-like entity. So, what is a horo? What is a kurai? Both of them represent an extent or an amount of anything, time, money, distance, etc. However, the main difference between them is that horo tends to imply that the amount or degree involved is great, and kurai either marks it as indefinite, as something we're not sure about, or, in some cases, which we'll talk about a bit later, that it is small, that it's less than we might have expected or hoped. So, to illustrate this difference, let's look at them both in a very simple construction. Kore kurai means about this much, about this amount, about this far, about this fast, about this temperature, whatever. Kore horo means this much, this amount, this hot, this cold, but it's stressing that this is a large extent, a large degree. So, if we say, kore horo warui to wa omoenakatta, we're saying, I didn't think it was this bad. So, the kore, this, modifying horo, is not only saying this bad, it's saying that this bad is a lot. This is more than we might have expected or desired. Negatively, if we say sore horo waruku nai, we're saying it's not that bad. Now, what's sore referring to in a case like this? It can be referring to something we've already referred to a degree or an extent that we've already been discussing. But also, just as in English, sore, or that, can simply mean an amount that we might have expected. So, again, the thing modifying horo, the sore, represents a great amount, an upper limit, and then we're falling short of that upper limit marked by horo. So, sore horo waruku nai means not that bad, either not that bad, as we've been discussing, or as is implied in the conversation, or simply not that bad, which works exactly the same as it does in English. The that, when there's no reference point, simply means what we might have expected or what it might have been. So if we say in English it's not that bad, we mean it's not very bad, it's not as bad as it might have been. And the same with sore horo waruku nai. If we're not referring to a specific defined that, then we're saying it's not very bad, it's not all that bad. And again, horo is often used to mark one side of a comparison, and once again, horo represents the greater side, the upper limit. So if we say, watashi wa kanojo horo wakaku nai, we're saying, I'm not as young as she is. I'm not young to the extent that she is, and her extent is the higher extent, and therefore it's the one modifying horo. Now, horo can be used as an almost independent noun representing the upper limit of something. So if we say, fukano na horo, we're saying kano means possible, fukano means impossible, fukano na horo means the upper limit of impossibility. This is not just fukano, not just impossible, it's the horo of fukano. It's the upper limit of fukano. It's the height of impossibility. Or fukai na horo shitsure. Fukai is unpleasant, dislikable. Shutsure, of course, is rudeness. This is rudeness to the upper limit of unpleasantness, dislikableness. And these horos, where we use a adjectival noun and add na horo, the upper limit of that adjectival noun, using that adjectival noun to modify the horo, very often they tend to be negative things, but they can be more neutral. For example, we might say, fushigi na horo, the upper limit of mysteriousness, absolutely mysterious. And another commonly used expression with horo is horo ga aru. And this really means an upper limit exists. And this is usually used in complaining about something. So we say, joran ni mo horo ga aru, which is literally saying, even a joke has an upper limit. And what that usually means is what you're saying, what you're doing goes beyond a joke. Jokes have an upper limit and you've passed it. Baka ni mo horo ga aru. Stupidity has an upper limit, which is a bit like saying, even you can't be that stupid. Or you've passed the upper limit of stupidity. And perhaps the commonest use of horo, the one that you'll probably see all the time, is its use in forming comparisons. Now there are various kinds of comparison in Japanese, but horo is used particularly when we're stressing the extreme quality of something. It's often used for comparisons that are essentially exaggerations, but making the point that something is very much whatever it is we're saying it is. So we might say, shinu hodo atsui. It's hot to the extent of dying. Hara o sasu hodo samui. It's cold to the extent of penetrating the skin. Shinjiraranai hodo utsukushii keshiki. Scenery that's beautiful to the extent of being unbelievable. And this hodo, which is used for exaggeration, for literary purposes, just for making a point very strongly, is probably the hodo that you're going to see more of the time than any other. It's a very common use of hodo. So let's look at kurai. Kurai is most commonly used for approximation. So we might say, Tochaku suru no wa 8時くらいです. We're saying we're arriving at approximately 8 o'clock. 800 yen くらいです. It's around 800 yen. And this is very straightforward. We use it whenever we want to talk about an amount, a degree, an extent, and make it vague. Make it clear that we're not talking about an exact amount or an exact degree. And the only thing to bear in mind here is that sometimes Japanese people will use this when, in fact, the thing in question is exact. So, for example, we might say, どのくらいかかりますか? About how much will it cost? And we may be asking for an estimate, if it's the sort of thing where you ask for an estimate, but we may also be asking the price in a case where we can expect the seller to know the exact price, but somehow it seems a bit less pressing to ask for an approximate price rather than an exact one. And people will sometimes also do this when they're talking about the time of arrival or anything. And this is partly because Japanese people are, on the whole, very precise. So if they think there might be any chance of the time being slightly different or any fact being slightly different from what they're saying, it feels a bit safer to vague it up a little bit so that you haven't committed yourself to something exact that might not turn out to be exactly true. Now, the other use of kurai, or gurai, as I mentioned before, talks about an extent and makes the point that the extent is what we consider to be a small one rather than the large one that horo implies. So, if we say, 今日くらい家族と過ごそう, we're saying, today at least, let's spend as a family. And it's that kurai which gives us the at least meaning. It shows that when we're saying today, we're not just saying today, we're implying that maybe we don't spend much time as a family, maybe we won't be able to spend time as a family again, but today at least, let's spend time as a family. And very often, this kurai is used when one is complaining about something and when one is really saying, that not only is the kurai small, but even that small kurai wasn't forthcoming. And when it's used like that, it's often accompanied by another at least expression like sukunaku tomo or semete, and often marked at the end by a marker of regret, such as noni. So we might say, sukunaku tomo arigatou kurai ite kurete mo ii no ni, which literally is at least as little as thank you, if you kindly said, would be good, but in natural English you'd probably say, you might at least say thank you. What we're here saying is that as little as thank you, if you had kindly said, would be good, and we're adding no ni, which, as I've explained elsewhere, is in fact a contrastive clause connector. It's used to connect one logical clause to another to make a complete sentence, with the implication of but, that the second clause somewhat contrasts or contradicts with the first. But it's often used like this as a sentence ender, and the implication here is, it would be good if you said as little as thank you, but you don't even do that. So I hope this clarifies kurai and hodo. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below, and I will answer as usual. And if you have any other words that trouble you, that you'd like to ask me about, put those in the comments below as well. I'd like to thank my Gold Kokeshi patrons and all my patrons and supporters on Patreon and everywhere. I'm so happy for the support I get for this channel and for the work that I'm doing here, for the sense we have that all of us are working together to clarify Japanese, stopping it from being some kind of mystical, foreign, strange language, and seeing it for what it is, a beautiful and logical construction that we can all learn to use. And I'd like to thank you for attending this lesson. これからもよろしくお願いします。Class dismissed.